The new short track package was on full display at Phoenix and the reviews are quite mixed. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, my name is Taylor Kitchen and welcome to Above the Yellow Line, where we do motorsports media your way, talking about NASCAR literally all the time. And we're going to be traveling the next few weeks, so I'm going to be in different setups from here and there, so bear with me, but we're making it work with what we've got. Now, if you're a Toyota fan, this was definitely your weekend. They swept all races in NASCAR from ARCA, Xfinity to Cup. It was clear that one Toyota was going to win this race. I thought it was going to be between pole sitter Denny Hamlin or Tyler Reddick, who had a very fast number 45. Unfortunately, though, around lap 216, Denny Hamlin spun fighting for the lead against Tyler Reddick. He just dove it in way too deep trying to get and maintain that lead, and it did not work out for him. He finished in the 11th position when it's all said and done. But this caution forced teams to make some really tricky strategy calls, kind of splitting the field whether you stayed out or you went to pit. Notably, Truex stayed out and he was able to lead several laps before he was forced to come in for fuel, and that led the way for Christopher Bell to win the race. He had probably the third fastest car of the day, and then once he got the clean air and Hamlin was no longer a factor, it was just smooth sailing, lights out for that number 20. And on that restart, the last one of the day, he started in the 20th position, so we're talking about this package, and we'll get to that in a few, but starting from that 20th position, he had a fast enough car and an aerodynamically sound enough car. I will say, if that's too bold, maybe I'll back up on that comment, but he had an aerodynamically sound enough car to get him from 20th to 1st to win the race. I think that's pretty incredible, in a 5.5 second lead over second place Chris Buescher. Something else to mention too, remember in Phoenix in the fall, Christopher Bell was fighting for a championship and unfortunately blew a brake rotor and was out of the fight, so I think really good redemption for that team. Something to think about as the year goes on. They're now locked into the playoffs. Even though Christopher Bell had to fight his way back through the field during this race because of a pit road issue with one of the tires, it was still overall a very good day for this team to be proud of. I already told you Chris Buescher finished in second. In that third position was Ty Gibbs. Now, he actually has the best average finishing position of the full-time Cup Series drivers so far this season with an 8.75 according to Toby Christie. So the young gun who was in his sophomore season full-time, kind of making a name for himself. A win is coming for him. We say this every single week, we just don't know when it's going to happen. But when you have somebody who is this young that is leading all of the active full-time drivers in average finishing positions for a season, that's a big statement. So that's very good for him. Also very good for RFK, Brad Keselowski finishing 4th, which means it is a top 5 day for RFK as a whole. Good strategy calls there too to get them to this position. Another Ford driver that had a great day was Ryan Blaney, his 3rd top 5 in a row. You're hearing me correctly, 3rd top 5 in a row. I believe this is his 8th consecutive top 10 at Phoenix as well. So we already mentioned back in the fall when I did my championship preview that this was one of his best tracks. He's continuing to prove that. This top 5 finish almost didn't happen though, because Ross Chastain was right behind Blaney trying to fight for that position. I think Ryan Blaney beat him by 8/1000ths of a second. I think that's what they said over the broadcast. So this time Ryan Blaney beat Ross Chastain to the line. It wasn't for a race win, but still impressive nonetheless. Of course, Martin Truex Jr. had to pit to get fuel, but was able to work his way back up to 7th. 8th was Michael McDowell, 9th Chase Briscoe, and 10th Tyler Reddick. And then of course right outside that top 10 is Denny Hamlin in 11th. And I gotta mention the 12th place finisher of Noah Gragson. It could have been a top 10 day for his team. I think that caution kind of threw off their strategy, threw off their run, got them in the dirty air, and they weren't able to advance past that point. Again, I'm gonna mention this. Before the season started, I predicted that Noah Gragson would probably be the surprise driver of the year. I thought that he could either make the playoffs or just barely miss it. And he's proving right now that he is a driver that can do that. He's able to, with his talent, to do that right now in that 10 equipment. Same thing with Chase Briscoe, going back to Chase Briscoe and him being very impressive. Of course, this being one of his best tracks as well. And what hurts so much about this, with Noah Gragson in particular, is with that points penalty, it was like minus 35 drivers and team points. That puts them, of course, still in the back of the point standings. But without it, I think what I saw on Twitter, this might have been a Jeff Gluck stat. He would have been 15th in points right now inside the playoff standings. So very unfortunate to see that a mistake on the side, I don't want to say the team, but on the side of the team, is costing Noah Gragson right now what could be a solid spot, kind of on the cusp, but a solid spot inside those playoff standings. Again, there's still a long way to go, but when it's all said and done and he just misses the playoffs, if that's what happens, you're going to look back at this penalty at the beginning of the year and think, why? Other notable finishes here outside the top 10, Hendrick Motorsports. They started off having a pretty decent day. I'm kind of shocked that Kyle Larson wasn't a factor, but a really strong showing for that 9 team. I've been wondering where they've been so far this season, and they showed up. Unfortunately, though, with that caution on lap 216, I think that also messed up their strategy. Larson finished 14th, Byron 18th, Elliott 19th, and 20th, Alex Bowman. Now it's time to talk about some disappointments here today. IndyCar for Penske was awesome. Top 5 finishes for all of Penske's cars. Joseph Newgarden getting the win. Unfortunately, though, there are still some issues on the NASCAR side of the team for Penske, talking about 2/3 of their camp with Joey Logano and Austin Cindric. Cindric did not finish this race after an incident on lap 6 where Derek Kraus spun around, got loose. Austin Dillon was involved as well, and goodness gracious, for Austin Dillon, I just feel so bad for him. I believe this is the 3rd time in the first 4 races where this team has been caught in a wreck in the first 10 laps of the race, and they just don't have a chance the rest of the event, which is awful. As for Joey Logano, he tends to get involved in wrecks with some of the young guns in the field. John Hunter Nemechek just kind of slammed it to the back of him, spun Logano around. Also involved with this was Corey LaJoie, Zane Smith, Derek Kraus. And as for Corey LaJoie, this is a stat that breaks my heart because after 44 races of having no DNFs, this ends his streak. I believe it's the longest non-DNF streak in NASCAR history. Somebody fact check me on that. And we know Corey LaJoie, he's not known for junking equipment. He's able to bring equipment home clean or close to clean every single time. So unfortunate that that streak was broken. But for Joey Logano, this has been a very rough start to the season. And I firmly believe that he is taking on the championship slump for Ryan Blaney. So Blaney doesn't have to. We see typically with drivers that just won the championship that they start the season off on a very bad note or their entire season just sucks. So far, Ryan Blaney having a great season. Joey Logano, not so much. He finished 32nd at Daytona, 28th at Phoenix. He actually got a top 10 at Vegas, and this race, 34th. So when is that team going to turn it around? I don't know. He's typically decent at Bristol, so Bristol maybe, Richmond maybe. I mean, he has a decent time at short tracks, so potentially that 22 team can have a solid few weeks coming up with our longer short track stint that we're having. But I don't know. At this point, and I remember them talking about this on the broadcast, you have to start thinking, are we in so much of a points hole where we're going to have to start focusing on winning races versus points racing? I don't believe Joey Logano is in that place just yet, but it's something that this team is going to have to consider if the performance continues to be this way for the next, maybe 3 or 4 events. So those were some drivers I wanted to highlight that finished outside the top 10. Now let's shift our focus to this new short track package that had mixed reviews throughout the entirety of the weekend, mostly though on the negative side. Starting at practice, drivers were saying this was exponentially worse than last year, terrible, awful, etc. I mean, one look at your Twitter timeline, specifically, again, Jeff Gluck's Twitter timeline, back to back to back was just negative comments about how bad this package is and how difficult it is to pass or how impossible it is to pass with this package. Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, the only person that offered some type of positive criticism to this or offered some sort of positive outlook to this package was Denny Hamlin. He said this package did make things slightly better. It was like a 10% fix. He did say, however, what would help the racing even more is by upping the horsepower. Now, this is nothing new. We all know since the Gen 7 car debuted, this is something that we've all wanted is more horsepower. Denny Hamlin said in his time with the press this weekend that this could be done with one phone call. So apparently it's just that easy. The only thing holding them up is NASCAR okaying this whole thing. So all of this said, though, this was not as bad as Phoenix last year. Last year's Phoenix race, I gave a 40%. I hated it. I was frustrated. Honestly, I was very disappointed because I do love short track racing, but with what we have right now, it's not fun. This race was still not super fun, but it made me hopeful for what we're going to see in the future. Again, I know passing is rough. I know during the race, Bubba Wallace specifically was talking about how frustrating this situation was with the passing and the aerodynamics and etc. I understand people are still frustrated with the package, but I do have to agree with Denny Hamlin, and obviously I'm not in the cars, I'm not working on these cars, but things looked slightly better, especially for instance, Christopher Bell. Again, he restarted in the 20th position. I know those restarts can get chaotic. You can go 6 wide and get a good jump to get track position, but from 20th to 1st, that does not just happen on a restart. That takes time, and it takes a good car to get you to the front that can get through that dirty air. Maybe not as well as we would like, but at least better than what we've seen in the past. So for that reason, I'm gonna give this race a 60%. That still might be too big of a number, but it feels fine to me. This race didn't really leave me feeling one way or the other. I was just kind of impressed that it was better than last year. All of this to say, we're probably going to hear more driver opinions throughout the week, whether it's actions detrimental with Denny Hamlin, whether it's an interview on Sirius XM NASCAR radio, or whether it's anywhere else that they might talk to the media. We're going to hear more about their takes on this Gen 7 car at short tracks. And obviously, of course, we have Bristol coming up. Then we're going to have Richmond, Martinsville. I don't think it's in that order. I might have them mixed. But we're going to see really quickly how these teams adjust with this package and the changes as we go back to back to back with short tracks. The next few weeks, I might just call this show ATYL on the go because we are going to be traveling so much. And by we, I mean me, and even to Bristol. I'll be at Bristol with Ben Branscombe, so very excited about that. We'll be there whether it's rainy or sunny. It's always going to rain at Bristol in the spring. It's a given, so we're just ready for it. We're getting prepared for it. And I'm excited to have Ben join me in the recap episodes. We've gotten away from having guests on the recap episodes, so I'm very excited to have him join me for that. So if you see us, say hey. And of course, in the next few weeks, I will also be at Richmond and Martinsville, so if you see me, say hey. But again, lots of traveling the next few weeks. I am very excited though. It's gonna be back to back to back to back, essentially just short track racing, which I love and I'm very excited about. I'm just hoping that this package continues to improve, so fingers crossed. But that is it for me this week on this episode of Above the Yellow Line. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel and like this video as well, and leave a comment. What are your thoughts on this race and the package in general, and even a Christopher Bell win? What do we think about it? Let me know. But thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.